Book 101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is a medical researcher, an author, and of course, a fellow podcaster, no other than Mr. D. Foster.
How you doing, Daniel?
I'm fabulous, Mr. D. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Like you mentioned, I'm a medical researcher, podcaster, author of the book Benzo Free: The World of Anti-Anxiety Drugs and the Reality of Withdrawal. I went through an experience of dependence to an anti-anxiety medication, and I now work in that field helping out other people who have gone through similar instances. I've helped people with both anxiety and with complications from anxiety medications like Xanax, Klonopin, Ativan, Valium, that type of medication.
Mr. D. Foster, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And hoping for more and more empowering books as well as more empowering episodes of the podcast itself. So let's talk about anxiety medication and physical dependence, the hidden epidemic. So tell us, what is the hidden epidemic? Why is this issue often overlooked or misunderstood by both patients and some
Sure.
medical professionals?
You betcha. I'll be happy to introduce that to you. I'm speaking particularly of a class of medications called benzodiazepines. And they are medications like I mentioned before, Ativan, Xanax, Valium, Klonopin, that type of thing, typically prescribed for anxiety, also prescribed for insomnia and some other causes too. And they've been around for 60 years, but unfortunately, there's a subset of the population, so a minority of people who, after taking these drugs, have difficulty coming on, and it can last for sometimes months, sometimes years of ongoing neurological consequences after they come off of these drugs. And it's the part that's not talked about. That's why it's a hidden epidemic, is that it took us until recent research, and we've had a lot of success in the last year or two to finally educate the medical establishment on these complications that are going on. And I'm one of those people. So I went through that same experience, and that's what introduced me to this world.
So, Mr. D, tell us your book. Is it the same topic that we are talking about?
Yes, it is.
So, when did you publish it?
I published it in 2018. And since then, I've been doing more medical research and online support through my website and through our community group that we have.
Interesting. And what's the title of the book,
The
Mr.
title
D?
of my book is Benzo Free: The World of Anti-Anxiety Drugs and the Reality of Withdrawal.
The reality of withdrawing, for sure. So, can you clarify the critical difference between a physical dependence and addiction? Why is it conflating these two terms so damaging to patients who need help?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Daniel. That's one of the key problems we've had, is that most people, when they associate medications and withdrawal, they associate it with an acute withdrawal period, which is typically considered addiction, although modernly we call it substance use disorder, SUD. And that's more of the craving, that's more of the addiction type of experience that people are used to. There's another side to many medications called physical dependence. And that's when your body, your physiology becomes dependent on the drug. And that can actually last for a while. And with some medications, it can actually carry over for years after you stop taking the medication, as it did with me and many of the individuals we work with. So, physical dependence is a physiological change in the system. So, we have these receptors within our bodies, and they're called GABA A receptors. And basically, they receive a calming message of GABA, which is what calms you down. That's what calms you down when you get too anxious or you get too stressed. And for those of us who have taken medications a long time, those receptors become down regulated, meaning we can't calm ourselves like we used to. And so we get in these looping stages of anxiety, fight or flight, this extreme state. and it causes a whole slew of symptoms and psychological symptoms.
While millions are prescribed medication for anxiety, what estimates exist for how many of may be experiencing significantly physical dependence, and why is it so difficult to get an accurate number?
That's a great question. Yeah, we're estimating, and this is totally an anecdotal estimate, but we're estimating about 30% of individuals who have taken the drugs long term. And when we say long term, we mean typically longer than 2 to 4 weeks on the drug continuously. And so people who have done that, typically we've seen about 30%, although the number is still an estimate. We haven't really had any solid studies on what percentage of people will winding up with this protracted state. And there's a protracted state, there's a term we now use which is called bind for it, and it stands for benzodiazepine-induced neurological dysfunction. And I was actually one of the co-authors on the paper that identified that term. And we're now using that to help raise awareness for this. When I say protracted state, I mean a state of symptoms that lasts long past taking a last dose of the drug.
Interesting, Mr. D. And for many, medication starts as a legitimate lifeline.
Yeah.
What does a typical journey look like from a necessary prescription to state of problematic physical dependence?
It can start in a lot of different stages because there's more than just physical dependence. There's also withdrawal. There's also tolerance. There's different levels of withdrawal people can achieve. So, say you're on the medication, but the medication stops producing its effect. It stops calming you from your anxiety. It stops helping you get to sleep. And that would be a tolerance effect. So that's like a tolerance withdrawal, which mean the drug is no longer helping with that original condition you're having. And then there's other actions that happen when we start to withdraw the drug. And when you get into this protracted state or bind, like I mentioned, that's when you get sometimes these what we call de novo symptoms in medical, which actually means just new symptoms, symptoms you have not experienced before. And that's when we started to see this physical change, this physical dependence change. And those typically can come on while it's using the drug, but they typically start to increase while you're tapering off a drug and especially after you stop taking the drug, depending on how slow people come off the medication.
Mr. D, when a prescription is first written, how often are patients adequately warned about the potential for physical dependence and the challenge of discontinuation?
Unfortunately, it's been rare in the past. Most doctors were not properly educated on these complications. Again, it's been mostly recent research. There have been people that have raised alarm earlier. In 1979, here in the US, Senator Ted Kennedy actually spoke to the Senate subcommittee about the dangers of this class of medication. But unfortunately, not a lot was done after that, and these drugs still cause a lot of problems. And so we're still trying to raise awareness about these drugs and what's happening. So, um, it's one of those things where if you go to a doctor, most people that come to me for support or to our group for support have often gone to their doctors and gotten either no response or no help, or even the doctor saying, I don't believe that these are caused by this medication. So it's a condition that's rarely recognized in the medical field, but we are currently educating, and we've done some recent things this last year that have really helped us educate doctors on what's what's actually happening. But this takes a long time. It takes a long time to educate the entire medical establishment on these subset of individuals who have protracted symptoms.
Mr. D, withdrawal
Mhm.
can be notoriously prolonged and unpredictable. What makes the withdrawal process from these medications different from and often more severe than withdrawing from other substances?
That's a good question. We've seen some things like this in some other medications, but one of the first things we saw in benzodiazepines, which is this class of anti-anxiety drugs we're talking about, is this actual protracted state, and it's typically a certain type of symptoms. What we noticed in the literature, and we published this in one of our research papers, when we looked at the data, we saw that symptoms like hallucinations, seizures, whole body tremors that are typically see with withdrawal from benzos and other drugs like those typically only last within the first 30 days coming off the medication. Okay, while the drug's still in the body and you're still processing it. But we were looking at this condition that actually can linger long past that. And these are those neurological ones. And we have 14 categories we've identified of symptoms, 7 psychological, 7 physical, that people can go through, and they are all across the board, and they all have a neurological basis, and that's really what this is neurological dysfunction. And so people will start to experience these new symptoms, and sometimes extreme symptoms that can make it very difficult for people to carry on sometimes through this process. So
Some patients experience symptoms for a month or even years after stopping, a
yeah.
condition known as a post-acute withdrawal syndrome. Why does this happen and why is it frequently dismissed?
We don't know exactly why it happens. According to our research, we believe it's a factor of neuroadaptation and/or neurotoxicity, which is meaning a significant change to our nervous system. Okay, and a nervous system change that doesn't right itself rapidly, so it can take a long time for that change to happen. One of the things we found that does help, and this is one thing I want to make sure I emphasize, is that people who taper slowly off the medication typically do better. So I do want to mention that if anybody's currently taking a drug long term, not to go cold turkey. It could be very dangerous. So don't just suddenly stop taking the medication. It's best to work with your doctor and come off it slowly. And that's usually the best case that we've seen. But once that happens, we can sometimes see those things lingering on, and we don't know the exact cause. We don't know if certain people are more susceptible for certain reasons. We don't know if there's other medicines that come into play. We're still trying to figure out why this is happening to this subset of individuals.
On the medical and systemic challenges, Mr. D,
Mhm.
these medications are also vital tools for mental health. How can prescribers better balance the legitimate benefits with the very real risks of long term use?
I think that excellent. Thank you. What happens usually is that the problem is we realize these drugs. One thing I want to make sure I'm clear is I would never want to ban these drugs or say they're not useful. They are useful in certain circumstances. What we're trying to say is that, especially for general treating of anxiety or insomnia, long term is not recommended. Less than 2 to 4 weeks, or on occasion, doesn't seem to be causing the dependence, although we've seen it sometimes shorter than that time. But it should not be, and it never has really been intended to be, a long term medication. And yet, thousands, maybe millions of people are on these drugs long term. And this is stuff that we've just done recently. I was part of a panel for the American Society of Addiction Medicine that just published the first clinical guidelines on this for benzodiazepines. And it came out about a couple months ago. It actually states really clearly to taper slowly, and it talks about this protracted condition. And mentions these drugs should not be taken for more than 2 to 4 weeks, except for in specific cases, and those are outlined within that guideline. And this falls in with a lot of the recent medical guidelines from the medical establishment are now recognizing this and are on board, and we're just trying to get the word out to let people know that these drugs for some people can have long-term complications that can be very difficult and extreme. It's a Most people underestimate the severity of this condition for people who are going through it. I have lost people along the way, just to put it gently, but I've lost people along the way who couldn't get through this process. So
Mr. D, as a medical researcher, an author, as well as a podcaster, what are your short term
mhm.
and long term goals?
That's a good question, Daniel. I would say, right now it is my new community. I don't even life, and I think you mentioned that I'm trying to build this community up, which we're helping people with anxiety and the complications of anxiety medication. I still do my podcast, and I've been speaking at different events, and I try to help educate the medical community. But we're really trying to build a bigger infrastructure. One of the things with this benzo community, and I call it a benzo community, a lot of us do, is that because the medical establishment hadn't really recognized what was going on initially or and wasn't educated on it, we had to figure it out and we had to do it ourselves. So we have this massive grassroots effort of some amazing organizations that are in this community that have been helping to raise the alarm about this. And I've, for the last 10 years, actually 13 years now, I've been part of that community working in it. And my main goal is to continue that work, just continue that work, continue to raise awareness, and also continue to help people with anxiety. Because if we can help people get more healthy, natural tools to manage their anxiety, then not as many people are going to be put on these meds in the first place. And that would be a real plus that we could come up with. So we help both people who haven't been on the medication and people who have within our group. So
Good luck to your goals,
thank you.
Mr. D. And looking forward for more success and more research and more breakthrough to come.
Yes.
And can you give a piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Like me as in who are trying to recover, or like me as in what I do?
As a medical researcher, an author, and of
Okay.
course a podcaster.
I kind of um you you just stay at it. You stay at it, and if you find what you're wanting to do, you keep moving. I was in the middle of coming off this. My experience was extreme coming off my medication. I was on clonazepam for 12 years. And I am now 11 years benzo free, and I still have neurological complications from it. But that doesn't mean you have to stop doing things. So throughout that whole process, I wrote a book and I started doing research, and I started working with different podcasts, and I started trying, and I just kept trying to educate myself and help other people who were coming along and didn't have the knowledge yet. And so I think it is find what's passionate in you and just really dedicate yourself to it, because it does take a lot of work. But I have been blessed and I am grateful for the opportunities that I've been given. So I think that helps too.
Wow, thank you for that advice, Mr. D. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Yeah, I went to there's a few books out there on benzodiazepines, and I wrote some, but honestly, the books that helped me the most were more books on psychology and books on motivation and such. So I was a big fan of some of the Buddhist thinking that spoke to me for some reason. I don't have a history in that, but it really spoke to me. The Cow in the Parking Lot is one. It's a Zen approach to overcoming anger. Um, a real good book on anxiety is My Age of Anxiety by Scott Stossel. That one had a real good, a lot of information about anxiety, a lot of real good tools. Another book that really hit me was Loving What Is, and that one was by Byron Katie. She wrote a book that was basically teaching people how to accept. It's basically acceptance, on accepting what is, accepting where you are. And when you're going through such a difficult, painful, and very hard time in your life, I think sometimes you need to work on the way you address things, the way you address life, and the way you look at things, and to realize I am here now and I can get through this. But I need to accept where I'm at. I can't keep fighting against it. I just got to keep moving forward. I have to keep moving through it. There's no shortcut around this with bind and with benzo withdrawal. There's no shortcut. You have to work through it. But once people find acceptance, and once people have, and I've seen this time and time again, once they figure out where they're at and they start working towards healing, um, their outcome significantly improves. And I think her book, Loving What Is, was excellent in helping me understand that better as I was going through this.
Thank you for that recommended
Sure.
books, Mr. D. And for our listeners or people watching right now who feels they may be a physically dependent and want to explore change, what is the single most important first step they should take?
Get informed, figure out what's going on. There's a lot of great societies out there, a lot of great places to go to, learn about what's going on. Talk to your doctor, even if your doctor may not be receptive, find a doctor who is, and just take it one step at a time. You can get through this. Just take it one step at a time, but educate yourself and learn about what's going on is the number one step.
Yes, indeed. And for someone in the midst of this, what message of hope can you offer about brain's ability to heal and, well, recalibrate after long term medication use?
I can give a lot of hope in that regard, and that's one thing we really try to focus on at our group at Uneven Life is there's a lot of hope because thousands and thousands of us have done this and gotten through this and succeeded. And with a little help, and right now there's so much more support there was when I started my journey, 12 years ago. And so there are people to help you. There's communities like our community and other ones out there. There's so much information. It's so much a better environment now, and doctors are more educated. And so there's a lot more help than there used to be. And this is manageable. This is really manageable and it's temporary. So it's just sticking with it. It's staying focused. If you're coming off the medication, if that's what you choose, then taper slowly, work with your doctor, come off the medication slowly, and just work through the process. And there are people like myself and many other people out there who are willing to help you with that.
Very well said, Mr. D. Totally empowering. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do visit or listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in its third season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 and Review, and Music 101 in its fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its
You are a
first
busy
season.
man, Daniel. You are busy.
Busy indeed. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. So, Mr. D, if you could get one message across to doctors, patients, and the public about this hidden epidemic, what would it be?
It's that it exists and that it's real for thousands of people out there who are going through it. But there are people who, like myself and other ones, who have been working in it for a long time. We understand it and we can help people get through it. And I think that's the
Yes.
primary message.
Yes. We can help you people through the advocacy of Mr. DeForest. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Hoping for more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Mr. D, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your projects, or anything that you want to promote?
I would be happy to. Yeah, you can find out everything about us at unevenlife.com. That's our website. And my book, Benzo Free, is also available on Amazon.
And of course, your podcast. Please promote your podcast.
Yeah, my podcast is the Uneven Podcast and the Benzo Free Podcast. You can find those on most podcast carriers.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. D because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering episodes for the podcast, more and more empowering books to come, and for sure, more empowering advocacy to come. So, Mr. D, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been a pleasure.
More to come, people. See you soon.